Hey, what is going on, guys? This is SMEV Reviews. It's time to review the newest album from Beatles drummer Ringo Starr, Give More Love. Let's get to it. Ringo has devoted his life to philanthropy as well as just spreading peace and love and those kind of messages, and that really comes through in his most recent work. It is definitely the theme of the album, peace and love, which is his catchphrase, honestly, and it comes through. It is the most unoffensive set of tracks that I've heard in a very long time. It's 10 tracks that just focus on peace and love. And if it doesn't, it's just very simple guitar 60s kind of rock sound. It's very inoffensive, but that's also its biggest downfall, is that it doesn't try to do anything. There's no statements of any kind, political or just like deep emotional meanings, and that's okay in some circumstances, and I honestly do appreciate it in some circumstances, and this is a circumstance where I do think it works. That's kind of how Ringo works. His music is focused very much on sounding very 60s, and in that time period he was focused, it's a very big peace and love kind of era, that and through the 70s, so it makes sense that the music that he's trying to make sounds like that era, and so similar themes, like with the hippie movement and peace and love, come through in the music. So I think that honestly it works in this circumstance. But the problem is it's so inoffensive and does so little that it kind of just becomes a little bland and stagnant and does not seem to do very much. So Ringo could be equally praised for his utmost optimism and just fun, happy sounds, as well as that could be his biggest hindrance. And that's the problem. It's just very middle of the road. It could go, for depending on the person, it could go one way or the other, and that's the problem, is that it's not really a inviting album. If you like that sound of music, then you've just got another 10 tracks that sound like it. I mean, you just got some new material, but he's not trying to gain any new fan base by any means. It's just, he's just doing his thing. And with a name like Ringo Starr, you can do that. You have the celebrity power that you can just be content on riding on your laurels, but it definitely comes across as lazy from a reviewer point of view. I do enjoy the album, and I do think that there is some good, instrumentally, it is good. There is some very good guitar work. The drums are very punchy, and it's a very fun sounding album, but it just doesn't do very much and just comes across as kind of lazy because it just sounds very generic and does not try to do too much. One area the album does admittedly lack is in the vocals. Ringo, it really hasn't been with age. Honestly, I think with age, Ringo's vocals have become a little more strong just because they've matured, and his vocal style is kind of already sounded a little mature. So with age, it's matured better, and I honestly think that with age, he has sounded better. But that doesn't change the fact that Ringo is not that good of a singer. He can hit pitches. I don't ever feel like he's off on the pitch. I feel like he knows what he's doing with his voice. It's just not a particularly inviting voice. And that's not to insult him, honestly. I mean, he has some very good songs, and it works with some songs, but it's not just an initial sound that you want to go to. There are so many other more powerful and more interesting vocalists than Ringo, and that makes this album, and that makes him a little weak on the vocal aspect, and just makes it so that this album, that's one of its weak spots. One song on this album that really seems to work is On the Road Again. It's just a really fun track about just getting on the road and like touring, and it's just fun. I mean, he brings in some musician friends. He brings in Paul McCartney to do some screams, which honestly are very recognizable, and it's really fun to hear those two back together again after the Beatles. And then he also brings in Joe Walsh for some guitar. His guitar work does not stand out as like very Joe Walsh sounding, but it is definitely Joe Walsh in there, and it's just very fun. Like, it definitely sounds like just a group of guys are just having fun. It is a track that does stand out. There are a couple other standout tracks and a couple other weaker tracks, but really the whole album just kind of meshes together. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's just some more 60s music, and I like the Beatles. It's not like I'm just some kid who's trying to go, I don't like old music. I do actually like the Beatles, and I like all their music. I respect each of their solo careers, but Ringo just doesn't really try to do much with this album. He's definitely just making music for his fans, and it's just very inoffensive, but and that can be its greatest strength or its greatest weakness, just depending on your point of view. And from a critical point of view, it's very down the middle and doesn't really give me a lot to praise or to say negatively on. One small complaint is just that the female vocalists in this are just kind of awkwardly placed. I think it's the tone of their voices, but they're trying to sing background, but they sometimes get a little too much in the forefront, and kind of it just creates this weird dissonance. And I think their tone, I don't know, I don't even know if every background singer was the same, because they are supposed to be background singers, so it's hard to actually identify each of their voices, but they just seem very, it just does not seem to click very well, and they kind of seem awkward just because they don't have very good tonage, and so it just kind of sounds like some person singing along like karaoke or something, and it doesn't really work. That's a very, very minimal complaint, but it is one small complaint. After the initial tracks that are in this album, then there are 4 reworks of his previous work, and honestly, they do make the song sound differently. Maybe not significantly, but they are supposed to be reworks, and they do rework each of the songs. Specifically, Back Off Boogaloo, that song definitely makes it a little more harsher and a little darker than the original song, and it's just kind of fun to hear just a different reworking of it, and I do appreciate just when artists will kind of rework stuff, but not make that like they're included in their track listing, because normal albums have about 10 to 12. This has 14 tracks, and 4 of them are reworked, so he still had a good 10 tracks they recorded. So I appreciate that he still did that, but did not replace new tracks that could have been on the album with these reworks. But yet, I listen to this album and I don't have really many negatives. I mentioned the couple things that seem to be negatives to me, but really I don't have many negatives. It's very middle of the road because of that very inoffensive nature. But also just that complete optimism and happiness that Ringo brings to the table just kind of pushes this up to a little higher rating than it may have previously received, just because it's fun and he's just having a good time, and you can tell, and if the listener can tell that that the artist is having fun, then they'll have fun, and that just adds some genuine aspects to the album, because if you've got to feel what they're feeling, and he makes you feel it. Maybe it's not deep emotional feelings, but he's still making you feel what he's feeling, just that raw happiness, and it comes across pretty well. And honestly, it's a very middle of the road album. I mean, what's a better rating for it than a 5 out of 10? But what do you guys think? Leave it down in the comments. Tell me whether you like this album. Maybe you think I was too harsh. I think that this is a pretty good rating for it, because it's not bad. I don't think that a 5 out of 10 makes it bad. Depending on the day, it could be a 5.5 out of 10 or a 5. But it's not bad. It just doesn't have much to praise. It's very middle of the road, because while there are some negatives, his genuine happiness seems to pull it back up, but yet it's very safe, and it's very inoffensive, and that's why it gets that very middle of the road review and that very middle of the road rating. But I'd love to hear what you guys have to think, or any suggestions for future videos. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later.